While we spent most of the week talking about an angry minister on his bike and the Lib Dem party conference, elsewhere in the world there may be more pressing concerns. In particular, the threat of military conflict between Israel and Iran. Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad made his final address to the UN General Assembly yesterday before he steps down and accused the West of nuclear intimidation.
Testing new generations of ultra-modern weaponry and the pledge to disclose these armaments on due time is now being used as a new language of threat against nations to coerce them into accepting a new era of hegemony. Continued threat by the uncivilized Zionists to resort to military action against our great nation is a clear example of this bitter reality.
What he calls the Zionist regime is, of course, Israel, and both they and the United States boycotted the speech. To discuss the effect Ahmadinejad's speech will have on the Middle East, and particularly the likelihood that Israel will attack Iran, I'm joined by Ben Wallace, MP, Chair of the British-Iranian All-Party Parliamentary Group, and Douglas Murray, who's from the Henry Jackson Society. Douglas Murray, how likely do you think it is that Israel will attack Iran?
I think it's very likely, indeed inevitable, unless the international community, and I think particularly America, makes it extremely clear, so clear indeed that there is absolutely no doubt to Iran that the idea of the combination of the Islamic Revolutionary government in Iran gaining a nuclear device, gaining the capability to build a nuclear device, is completely intolerable to us. Unless that is made entirely clear, the Israelis will continue to feel that it is only them that truly feels threatened by this, only them that truly recognizes the magnitude of this threat to world peace, and therefore it will be the Israelis who will be the only ones who will act.
Ben Wallace, do you agree with that?
Not quite. I think, first of all, the Israelis will only act if they believe they'll get the support of countries like America and perhaps wider afield like Europe, Britain, etc. And they will only act if they actually think they can achieve the destruction of the nuclear programme. And that is, I think, one of the challenges ahead. And as we see, even within Israel, both the Ministry of Defence sources there and indeed ex-head of Mossad are split on whether Israel would be able to achieve that.
Right, but is there more that should be done then in the West to prevent those hostilities escalating?
Well, I think the West has gone down already fairly unilateral sanctions, without China and Russia coming alongside it. There's been a lot of pressure on Iran through both financial sanctions, to some extent elements of oil sanctions, and I think we're really in the zone to try and see whether Iran is going to respond to this. The problem is this is not just about Israel. What people forget, and it's not quite a sideshow, but actually this is much more about Saudi and Iran and the rivalries between Sunni and Shiism in the region, and who is going to be the dominant partner in that area. And I think that's what we often forget. And the worry for the West, the real worry for the West, is that Israel may be a false start. They may trigger something that both America, Britain and many other people do not want to happen now, and even if it was unsuccessful, cause a real problem in that region.
But are you saying then that actually the threats from Ahmadinejad over the years have been, if you like, just playing to the audience in terms of Israel, and that Israel takes it far too seriously? Or what is it you're implying? Well,
first of all, Israel and Iran, and actually in other parts of the Middle East, have a huge history of rhetoric as opposed to the reality that they do below the scene. Throughout the whole 80s, at the height of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini, the last Supreme Leader's rhetoric against Zionist Israel, as he would call it, against the sort of, the state that shouldn't be. In Iran and Israel were allies. It was Israel that was arming Iran throughout the Iran-Iraq war, not the West. It was Israel that knew that on many occasions Iran was the counterbalance to Iraq and Egyptian power. So we have to separate rhetoric from often the reality.
Well, and doesn't Britain have to do that?
In that case, let me be as clear as possible. This is not about rhetoric, and not about rhetoric only. I think it would be a great mistake to think that. The President of Iran, the Supreme Leader, all of the senior figures in the Iranian regime have for 30 years expressed the desire to wipe out the state of Israel,
but why
and
do you think it's
if I
just
just finish, and to annihilate the nation. Now, Among other things, at the moment, they are doing what they can with their current spread of capabilities in the region. They arm Hezbollah, for instance. They fund Hezbollah, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Hezbollah then spends its time destabilizing the Lebanon, currently is massacring people in Syria who are trying to overthrow the Assad regime, and, of course, has been waging a war for 3 decades on Israel. That's what it's doing now. If you like what Iran is doing without a nuclear bomb, you'll love what they do when they've got one. The idea this is solely about rhetoric is a terrible mistake, but the rhetoric does matter, and it is not nothing that a world leader like Ahmadinejad is able to continuously claim that the last Holocaust did not happen, whilst calling for the next one to occur.
Right, you're underestimating the threat here, Ben Wallace, says Douglas Murray. You're making a terrible mistake if you think it's just rhetoric.
No, I don't say it's just rhetoric, and I absolutely agree that Iran has used its third parties and its terrorist links to certainly wage war on Israel, and I don't underestimate, the damage that does to Israelis and the Israeli position in the Middle East. But, let's remember, and this is, Mir Dagan, the ex-head of Mossad, so certainly not an amateur in this game, said only in March this year he did not believe that the Iranian people were irrational, and nor were their leadership, when it came to mutually assured destruction. So should Iran suddenly decide to have a nuclear weapon, it was very clear that they didn't think the Iranians wanted to obliterate themselves, because that would happen.
Let's take this straight on. First of all, Israel is a democracy. It has a plurality of opinion. It has very many voices. Sit in a room with 6 Israelis and you'll get 7 opinions. The ex-head of Mossad is quite a significant individual. Absolutely, and so is the Prime Minister of Israel, a very significant individual, and with experience in these matters. There are many Israelis, not just Prime Minister Netanyahu, but many others who realise this threat and recognise it should be taken seriously. But one other point is very important to mention on this. This is a problem for Israel first. There is no doubt about that. Anyone who thinks that's not the case is
Does Britain really have a role in this?
We do have a role. We already have a role in sanctions. We will have a role in other things as well. But just one other point that's very important. This is a problem for Israel first, but only first. For the region and for the world, what happens after Iran goes nuclear, we already know, the IAEA already knows, all the international bodies already know, is that Saudi, Egypt, all of the other countries in the region will themselves be nuking up. At that point, you have the most volatile region in the world, armed to the teeth with the most genocidal weaponry. If anybody thinks that this is solely about Israel, they are very greatly mistaken.
Well, hang on.
Yes,
let's remember, Pakistan has a nuclear weapon.
Are you glad that that's the situation, or would you rather stop that?
Am I glad Israel has a nuclear weapon? No, I'm not either.
Oh, really?
No, I'm not. Let's remember the Middle East nuclear arms race, if that's what you want to describe it, started with Israel, and Israel does not comply with the UN IAEA directives aimed at it. So we have to recognise that the real issue here, and let's remember, I know what's in Israel's national interest, and I fully defend their right to defend themselves. But that is not Britain's national interest. Let's remember this.
Now that is the question.
Who is blowing up Twin Towers? Who is plotting to kill and murder in this country? It is not Shia Iranian-sponsored terrorism. It's Wahhabi Sunni extremism.
And who is it?
Who is not Iranian-sponsored.
Okay, let's talk about that. Is the
Sponsored.
key. What is in Britain's interest here in terms of what foreign policy we undertake?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that the Conservative MP in question doesn't mind the assault on our embassy in Tehran, which was done with the backing and encouragement of the Iranian government. I'm sorry that the ransacking of embassies isn't
But let's get to the point of
such
Britain's
importance
interest.
anymore.
Britain's interest in how they handle these.
Our interest is extremely clear. First of all, Israel is an ally of ours and the only thriving democracy in the region, and a security interest. Secondly, it is in our national interest that the Middle East does not go nuclear across the board, because if it does, we will see a Mexican gunfight, at the end of which nobody will know who started it.
I'm going to have to finish it there, but gentlemen, I'm so sorry, Ben.
I don't want to go nuclear either. Let's remember, we want to take nuclear weapons out of the Middle East.
Okay.
That includes Israel and Pakistan.
Take them all out and you lose Israel. It's as simple as that.
I have to stop you both there, but thank you both very much for a very interesting discussion. Now,